Great synagogue in Rome last Sunday, 8 days ago. And the story I wanted to tell you is that when I met the Pope, I spoke to him about ISGAP, and I think there's some work that the Vatican is going to do with ISGAP. We have an amazing director of ISGAP Italy named Robert Hassan, and he's working with David Rosen and other scholars to work with the Vatican on anti-Semitism, and it seems like we can do some effective work, potentially. But when I met the Pope, I explained what we're doing, and I told him that in the Jewish tradition, there's a custom or a tradition that when you have a very important meeting, or if you're going into battle, you go to pray at the tomb of a sage. So I was staying in Tzfat, and I spent an evening at the tomb of the Rashbi. And Rashbi fled the Roman invasion from Jerusalem to Tzfat, or near Tzfat, and he played a very important role, as we know, in creating the Zohar and the Talmudic text. So when I told this to the Pope, of all the things that we were discussing, this is the thing that he lit up on. And I said that this is a great lesson for us too, because we need to accept each other, and that I hope the next 2,000 years will be a lot better than the last 2,000 years. And he said I should pray for him, and I said, God bless you, and that was the meeting. So it was very interesting. So we have a great scholar and friend of ISGAP, Mordecai Kedar, and Moti will be introduced by another friend and great scholar, Vivaldi. Vivaldi is a senior research scholar at ISGAP. He took part in our Oxford program in the summer. We brought professors from 17 countries together at Oxford University, where we do teacher training programs. We help scholars create curriculum to teach in their home universities for credit, because literally there are no courses on contemporary anti-Semitism in the academy. And this is a program that we're trying to develop and to continue, where we can train professors from around the world to go back to their home universities and create a space for faculty and students to engage the ideas that we're going to hear this evening. So it's an honor to have Vivaldi and Moti with us.
Well, good evening and welcome. So it is going to be a wonderful event, and I am delighted, and I have to admit very excited, the sight of so many wonderful people. And I am honored to introduce Dr. Mordecai Kedar, who ironically doesn't need any introduction here in the room. Okay, so Dr. Kedar will be speaking to us this evening about radical Islam and its effects on anti-Semitism. So just to give you an idea about Dr. Kedar's background, he is a lecturer at Bar Ilan University in Israel. Also, he is a member of several academic institutions. He's the director of the Center for the Study of the Middle East and Islam under formation at Bar Ilan University in Israel. He is also a research associate at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at the same university. He's also the member of the Erzilia Interdisciplinary Center Israel Study Team. Also, he's the member of the International Board of the Berlin International Center for the Study of Antisemitism. Lastly, Dr. Kedar sits on the International Board of the Canadian Institute for Jewish Research. Dr. Kedar is also a columnist at the weekly analysis about the Middle East of the Israeli, Makor Rishon, please forgive my pronunciation. At the weekly analysis about the Middle East of the Israeli Yom LeYom. So Dr. Kedar is also a well-established scholar. He has published several articles, and I am looking forward to a very stimulating talk and presentation this evening. So Dr. Kedar, welcome. It's all yours now.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Radical Islam and its effect on anti-Semitism. First of all, I would like to ask a question. Is there radical Islam? So the mere posing this question brings the possibility that there is no radical Islam, if I question. Well, in order to establish the idea that there is radical Islam, we have to assume that there is another kind of Islam, moderate Islam. So, in order to check if there are two kinds of Islam, there should be two kinds of Quran. One radical and one moderate. Is there such a thing?
No.
No. There is one Quran. Is there radical hadith, means oral tradition, versus moderate hadith? No. There is one body of hadith, of stories about Muhammad, oral tradition. And the third most important scripture of Islam is the Sirah, means the biography of Muhammad. There are not two biographies, one radical, one moderate. So, how come we have radical Islam, as if there is such a thing, versus moderate Islam? What happens is that the sources of Islam, if we take only these three sources, the Quran, the Hadith, and the Sirah, that means the Quran, the oral tradition, and the biography of Muhammad, these books actually contain everything, from the most radical ideas to the most moderate, from the most radical precedents as appear in the biography of Muhammad. And the biography of Muhammad is something which every Muslim should emulate, because he was the Ma'soom, he was the role model for every Muslim. So what he did is actually the role model for every Muslim. So the Sirah has everything. And I can give you good examples how Muhammad was very nice to Jews. But if you turn the page, you can find how he slaughtered them. The same thing in the Quran. It could be very moderate, like saying, La ikraha fi din, as it said in the Quran, no compulsion in religion, which is very nice. But on the other side, there are all these verses about the jihad and killing the infidels and so forth. So what is the Quran, radical or moderate? And so is the Hadith, the oral tradition. There is a verse which says that he who kills one man as if he killed the whole mankind. Great. Very moderate attitude to life of people. Definitely good. But on the other side, if you turn the page, you find all kinds of Sharia of the jihad, how to fight the infidels, how to slay them. Okay, so there is no radical Quran versus moderate or Hadith, but we have everything in the same books. Now, imagine somebody, Muslim, who was born in New York, the best place on earth. People are moderate, people are nice, people are cute, people are kind to each other, holding your door, say, thank you very much. Say, okay, people are nice. If a Muslim grew up in New York, most probably, when he has to shape his Islamic ideas, if he absorbs the atmosphere of New York, he will pick from the Quran the verses which, like Rafidin, no compulsion in religion. From the Hadith, he will take the ideas of the how to be moderate, and from the Sirah of Muhammad, the biography, he will take the precedents which show how nice, how kind the Prophet was. Another Muslim, let's say who was born in Libya, where people are killing each other all day long, when he has to shape his Islam, when he has to tailor his Islamic garment, he will take, probably since he absorbs the culture of Libya, he will take from the Quran the verses of the jihad. From the Hadith, he will take the orders of how to perform the jihad. And from the Sirah of Muhammad, the biography, he will take all these precedents which support his culture. Means, we don't have radical Islam versus moderate Islam. We have radical Muslims, people, versus moderate Muslims, people. And if those people group, to organizations. So we have radical organizations, which are made of radical people who took from the sources of Islam all the precedents, the verses, and the orders how to be radical, and other organizations, which I myself meet with in all kinds of places, like Muslims Facing Tomorrow in Toronto. Very moderate people. They wouldn't even kill a mosquito. So for them, since they are moderate people, they take from the Quran, from the Hadith, and from the Sirah, all the verses, the ideas, and the precedents which support their culture, since they live in Toronto and internalized the atmosphere of Toronto, which is more or less like New York. Okay? So this is what I mean. There is no radical Islam. There are radical Muslims. Now, the question is, where are the Muslims? Where are they between most radical and most moderate? And we talk about a nation or a culture of 1.5 billion people. 1,500 millions. Okay? Every one of them is somewhere between the poles, between the most radical and the most moderate. Places himself, or his society places him, his family, depends how he behaves, on somewhere between the most radical and the most moderate. There are all kinds of research which say that 20%, 30% of Muslims could be defined as radical, while others like 80%, 75%, 85% could be defined or could be described as moderate. If it's 25% of Islam are radical, we are talking about something which is like 350 million people worldwide. Okay? This is something which, even if 1% of them is radical, is a problem, because if from 1,500 millions, 1% is 15 million people. If only 15 million people are radical, as let's say the Islamic State or the Al-Qaeda or organizations like this, the world is in a big problem. And according to all kinds of research, the percentage of radical Muslims is way above 1%. I would like to show you a clip. Which was taken in Europe, I think. It will come. This is a clip about a convention of Muslims somewhere in Europe, and the question was about, is there radical Islam or not? It is translated to Hebrew, but I'll translate it to English.
Can we have the camera? Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience, sir? Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience? Because every now and then, every time we have a conference, every time we invite a speaker, they always can come with the same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that. He is homophobic. They subjugate women, etc., etc., etc. It's the same old stuff coming all the time. And we always try to tell them, I always try to tell them that, look, it's not that speaker that we're inviting who has these extreme radical views, as you say. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things. Just because they're not telling you about it, or just because they're not out there in the media, doesn't mean they don't believe in them. So I will ask you, everyone in the room, how many of you are normal Muslims? You're not extremists, you're not radical, just normal Sunni Muslims. Please raise your hands. everybody, mashallah, subhanallah. Okay, take down your hands again. How many of you agree that men and women should sit separate? Please raise your hands.
Sisters in particular.
Everyone agree. Everyone agree. Brothers and sisters. Subhanallah. So it's not just these radical sheikhs then. Allahu Akbar. Next question. How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, if it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind. And that is what we should apply in the world. Who agrees with that? Allahu Akbar. Are you all radical extremists? Subhanallah. So all of you are saying that you are common Muslims, you all go to the different masajids in Norway, or are you like a specific sect, like the Islam net sect or anything like that? Are you like that? No. Are you like that? Please raise your hand if you're like this extreme Islam net sect or anything like that. No one. Allahu Akbar. How many of you just go to these normal masajids in Norway, the normal Sunni mosques? Please raise your hands. Allahu Akbar. So what's the politicians gonna say now? What's the media gonna say now? That we're all extremists? We're all radicals? We need to deport all of us from this country? Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Takbir! Takbir! Takbir!
Okay, this is an original thing. This actually exemplifies the problem. That what we call moderate or radical Muslims could be, according to this clip, regular people who go to regular mosques. Okay, so the definition of radical versus moderate should be.
Can I interject for 1 second?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a hard time on this.
Good.
Very quick point. I grew up in Montreal, and the family I grew up with, the children are my age, the parents came from India, migrated from India to Montreal, Muslim, and created one of the first mosques in Montreal. He's a clean-shaven man who was friends with Jewish people. And in the late 1980s, bearded, ultra-religious Muslims told him that he has to keep a beard and he has to stop seeing his Jewish friends, otherwise he can't come to the mosque. And the original founders of that mosque were kicked out, and they created a new mosque. But there are mosques and there are Muslims who don't subscribe to this worldview. So
okay.
It's very important.
So this is what I mean, that Muslims differ from each other in their teachings and attitude. Apparently this gathering was a gathering of people who share the same mind, who share the same ideas. So this is why he got almost everybody voting when he wanted to. Yes.
Where was that?
In Europe, I think in Norway?
Why were they speaking in English?
Why speaking English? I have no idea.
It wasn't in Canada?
Are you sure it's in Norway?
Yes,
It says, okay.
But he was trying to show it's Sharia law.
She tries to show that there is no radical Islam, just what I claim. There is Islam. Okay, and everyone picks from the sources. Okay, so this is just to begin with what the topic of tonight, radical Islam and its effects on anti-Semitism. We shouldn't look at radical Islam. We should look at Islam. Now we can see what Islam says about these things, and its contribution to modern anti-Semitism. I think in the last time, which I was here, I spoke about the roots of the problems between Islam and Judaism. Just to remind those who were, Islam in its own mind, on its own teachings, considers itself as a religion which came to the world not to live side by side with Judaism and Christianity. It rather came to the world to replace Judaism and Christianity. They took the theory of replacement of the Christians, and they took it one step forward, and now Islam came to the world to replace. In its own definition, Islam is Din al-Haq, means religion of truth, while Judaism and Christianity are Din al-Batil, means religion of falsehood, since Islam came to the world to turn them into null and void. So, those Jews who have not converted to Islam are those upon whom, according to Quran, upon whom the wrath of Allah rests until the end of time or until they convert to Islam. And the Christians are those who went astray. And this is already in the first chapter of the Quran, which Muslims cite numerous times every day. So, this is the main concept about Judaism and Christianity. However, Islam, not only this, it's the best religion in the world, because in the Quran there is a verse which says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linas," means you Muslims are the best nation which came out to mankind. This is what the Quran states, while all the other nations are bad nations. What? But when they go and they see the situation on the ground, they compare this verse, this idea in the Quran, that you Muslims are the best people on earth. And when they see what happens every day, when they kill each other, the way they live in their countries, inflicted by violence, poverty, wars, everlasting wars, and on one side. And when they see the Christians and the Jews live in peace, normal countries, democracies, development, normal places like here, it creates some kind of contradiction between the Quran, which says that they, Muslims, are the best people on earth, states this, and the situation. And this contradiction is some kind of a short in their mind. How can it exist? This is something which cannot be there. They cannot fathom the fact that they are in such bad condition as they are, while the infidels, Jews and Christians, those who betrayed Muhammad, those who didn't want to convert to Islam, those who still hold to religions which are null and void, how come they are so successful and so nice, to a degree that so many Muslims want to emigrate to the good, nice, peaceful, progressive countries which of the Christians and the Jews? If Israel, look at how many of them want to come to Israel. If Israel didn't build a fence between Israel and Egypt, who knows how many millions will come from Egypt to Israel. Okay? Although Israel is an apartheid state, as they say, racist, and of course a state of Jews who did not accept the religion of Allah. Okay? So this is some kind of contradiction, and they envy the Christians and the Jews, and therefore they hate them. Because if you envy somebody, if you're jealous at somebody, very easily you start to hate him or her. Okay? And this is one of the sources. Now they go to Europe, the immigration to Europe, which we see today, and what do they see? The Christians and the Jews. So what they do to the Christians is something which can be discussed in other places, like what they do to the girls in Sweden, or in what happened in Cologne. Okay, the way they look at Christians, and especially the ladies or the girls, which are allowed for them, never mind. But the Jews here are the problem, because Jews are successful, Jews are immersed in the societies, Jews are prosperous, are the good lawyers and accountants and artists and doctors and whatever they are, and professors in universities, and this creates some kind of a contradiction. How come Jews are so successful when we have to wash dishes in restaurants, or clean apartments, or work in those professions? After all, we are the best nation which came out to mankind according to the Quran. So the difference which they see between the teaching of the Quran on one side, or the ideal which was stated by the Quran on one side, and the situation on the ground, this is something which gets them very, very angry. How come Jews are so successful? When it comes to what happens in Israel, it's even worse. Because the land of Israel, according to their teachings, is an Islamic country. Palestine or Palestine. And a land, Islamic land. And any land, has only one-way ticket to enter Islam, not to come out of Islam. This is why, by the way, they still fantasize on Spain, which should return to Islam, because Islam was in Spain between the 8th century and the 15th century. Okay? So, since it was taken by the Christians, this is against the rule of physics, or the rules of Islam actually. So, this is why Spain should return to Islam before anything else. So is Sicily, the island in the southern part of Italy, large parts of the Balkans, all the way up to Vienna, where they were defeated in 1683 CE. And of course, the land of Israel, as they call it, Palestine, definitely this is an Islamic country, Islamic land. Those Jews came and stole this land, and the Jews have absolutely whatsoever no right to take a land out of Muslims. So first of all, the land of Israel is stolen as they see it. Secondly, we Jews do not deserve to have a state. Why? Because we are not a nation. We are communities which belong to all the nations in the world. The American Jews are part of the American nation, who happen to be Jews like others who are Christians or Muslims or others. Jews in Morocco are Moroccan Arabs who happen to be Jewish, just like other Moroccan Arabs who are Muslims. The same thing in Afghanistan, same thing in Yemen, Germany, Poland, like my parents, who are, according to the Islamic belief, Polish in their nationality, while being Jews from the religious point of view. Okay, they should remain in Poland, and Jews in America should remain in America. Jews in Yemen should remain in Yemen, and so forth. What the heck gave them the idea that they are one nation? They are not one nation. But do they look alike? Do they eat the same food? Do they dance to the same music? Forget it. So this is why the Jews are not a nation. This is why they do not deserve a state. And here they are coming and establish a state on an Islamic land, while their religion, which they claim that they have a right to a state because they are Jews, is anyway null and void. So Israel as a state has absolutely whatsoever no right to exist even on 1 square millimeter in Tel Aviv. Never mind the occupation of 1967. The real occupation was in 1948 when the state was established. So this is, I would say, the core look at Jews both in Europe and in Israel, Europe and everywhere where they go, and in Israel, as people who behave totally opposite to the teachings of Islam, behave totally against the expectations of Islam, and this is why Jews should be treated according to the Islamic Sharia, which states what it states about people who do not behave according to the Sharia, especially when they are not Muslims. So this is, I think, is the core motives of the Islamic teachings, and we see them much in Europe. We see them within the Palestinian Authority. We see them even within the Muslim community inside Israel. The Islamic movement inside Israel disseminates exactly these messages. And I spent like 20 years in researching of this movement, And only recently, some parts of the movement were outlawed. Other parts are still accepted by the country because they deal with health clinics and schools and so forth. So the state doesn't want to close them all, but the organization, which is not involved in these da'wah actions, are closed since I think last October. So yes, we have them from within Israel, we have them with the so-called Palestinians, we have them in Egypt, we have them in Jordan, in former Syria. Syria doesn't exist anymore, and we find it also in Europe in some communities. And this is, I think, the core motivation of the modern Islamic anti-Semitism, which we see even in here, in the United States of America. Because today in universities, where freedom of speech is well kept, so hate speech against Jews, we find it time and again. When I go to institutions in this country, I hear from Jewish students how they feel worried, intimidated in institutions which are there for learning, which turn more and more into stages of anti-Semitism under the cover of anti-Israelism or anti-Zionism, but the core motivations of those who call for example, the BDS against Israel, it's about Judaism before everything else. I think I'll stop here. Not because I don't have what to say, but I think I want people to ask and to say. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'll repeat the question.
Right. How would you respond to this then? You mentioned how Muslims living in Arab countries, for example, see all the destruction around them and are envious when they hear about successful, prosperous, peaceful lives of those who live in Christian countries. Would this observation be, well, would this be in line with those who say, who are not represented in this room, with those who say that the cause of terrorism is poverty? How does one respond to that?
Well, it doesn't go along facts. In Western mind, poverty creates extremism, violence, as you can see in some neighborhoods of poverty in all kinds of places in the world. So people think like Westerners, and they project their views on their societies on the Middle East, which works according to totally different rules. Look, Bin Laden, the chief terrorist, who was a billionaire. What, was he unemployed? Only recently, another good example, a surgeon from Barzilai hospital in Israel, in Ashkelon, a Bedouin guy, Muslim, took 1 week vacation, and went to Turkey, but he didn't come back. When the hospital started to look for him, family said that he didn't come back from Turkey. So they contacted the Turks, and yes, he went to Syria to fight in the Islamic State. Eventually he got killed, but he had a job, very good job. You know how much a surgeon in Israel makes? Tremendous, and for good reason. Okay, so this assumption, which people think that people go to be jihadists because they live in poverty, it doesn't coincide with the facts.
The 9/11 attack.
9/11?
Your turn.
Yes, lady.
So I'm sure that in your studies you realize that it's not just Jews who live all around the world in other countries. Italians, Germans, French. There are plenty of people.
They're all Christians.
Not
Italians, most of them are Christians, as much as I remember.
I have friends who are Italian Jews, but the point is that they live, you said, because they're Jewish and they're all around living in other countries, that condones their hatred toward Jews. But what about all the other citizens of other countries that live all around the world?
So they are, what, Indians? Look, in India, Charles, what is about other nations in the world which apparently they don't hate? Look, Charles talked about the Indians. In India, there are some 100 million Muslims. 100 million Muslims, more than Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya combined. These Muslims in India, in most cases, are very moderate people. When I go to media, I see them. They do nothing to anybody. Because in the culture in India is acceptance. There are so many religions and sects in India that if they didn't live in peace with each other, India would be a mayhem. And India is not. The name of the game in India is live and let live. Don't step on anybody's toes, let others be the others, and mind your own business. So Muslims who live in India absorb this idea and they mind their own business. They don't interfere in others' business. So everybody can live with them and they live with everybody else. Of course, there are some radicals in India as well. For example, a guy named Maududi, who was one of the masterminds of modern terrorism led by Islam. Okay, so most of the 100 million Indians are moderate. And they view, look, and India is full of idol worshipping, according to Islam. Buddhists especially, or Hindus. They are not even Christians and Jews. Christians and Jews, according to Islam, are not idol worshippers. They have a book. But the Hindus and the others are definitely idol worshippers. And yet, Muslims live with them. So you see that they are part of the moderate part of Muslims.
Yes, sir. Your turn. Then this gentleman here.
Two very quick questions. So, if the Muslims see the Christians and the Jews living like this, why does it occur to them maybe we should imitate the Christians and the Jews, the way they live, how they believe, and maybe then we can become successful? Second question, I've seen you many times talk about your 8 states of Palestine. Just 2 sentences on that. I mean, you look all over the Muslim world. I work in Muslim country. They're all tribal. They're not really countries. So making a state of Palestine is just, they're going to kill each other the same way. How much traction does your 8 states of Palestine have? Who do you talk to about it? Does it have traction with Israelis, with Arabs, with Europeans? Who's believing in it? Who are you getting it out to? I think it's incredibly important. I want to see that out there.
Thanks. Okay, so I'll just repeat the questions. One is about why do not Muslims imitate the others to be successful and prosperous as others are? And the second is about the 8 states or the 8 emirate solution, which I suggested. About the first question, about why do not Muslims go and imitate in order to follow the others as they are? Yes, there are many Muslims who come to these countries to become Americans or become Europeans, to become French in France. Look, in France, there was a minister of justice, a lady named Rachida Dati, in the days of Sarkozy. She was from Morocco, her parents from Morocco. She was born Muslim, but she was, as far as could be, from Islam, because being an unmarried woman in her 30s, as a minister, she was pregnant. But in France, you are not allowed to talk about anything besides this part of the human being. All the other parts are not of your business. So, that's how it was. And she was not married. And ex-Muslim or Muslim, I don't know. I never asked what she is. But she was totally French, to a degree that she allowed herself being pregnant and appear in public without marriage. Okay? And there are many other Muslims who become Americans, French, so forth, and nobody should have any issue with these people, because they became people who are what they immigrated to. The problem is with those who emigrate to other countries, but they don't, first of all, they don't want to be part of the country, not to adopt the culture, not to become prosperous, but they want to perpetuate their Islam. Not only this, to take over the countries, as was found in this country, in the United States, the memorandum of the Muslim Brotherhood, which was caught, and you can find it on the net, the explanatory memorandum. Just Google this and you can read a magnificent document of 15 pages in Arabic and 15 pages in English, which is translated by the Ministry of Justice here, and you can read it in English, how they plan to take America over. Okay? So there are those who come to the West in order to become Americans, and there are those who come to here in order to take America over. So there are those on this. To your question, second question about the Palestinian Emirates, since it's not exactly what I plan to speak here, I can speak about this for 3 hours. But you can go to a website which describes it very nicely, I think. www.palestinianemirates.com. Palestinianemirates.com. You can read there much material.
Yes, sir.
So Yoram Ettinger has various different estimates of the population of the West Bank than what the Palestinian Authority.
Arnon Sofer also.
Where do you, how do you estimate their population? Are they a threat demographically at all? And I'm interested in how you fall on that. But also, are they emigrating away? Is there anything that you would recommend that the American community do to encourage them to emigrate away?
Well, you asked actually two questions about the Palestinian population in the so-called West Bank, Judea and Samaria rather. About their demography, there are two, I would say, schools in Israel. The school of Arnon Sofer, and which finds bigger numbers, and Yoram Ettinger and his crew, which find less number. I'm not in demography. Demography is not my field. I read both reports. Both reports sound convincing, and apparently the truth is somewhere between the big number of Arnon Sofer and the small number of Ettinger. Somewhere, I have no idea where. Your second question about immigration. Israel doesn't encourage anyone to live anywhere because this is not our mission. Not in the Israeli Arabs who are citizens in Israel, neither the people in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria or Palestinian Authority rather. And those who do not live, and actually neither those in Israel and those in the Palestinian Authority, they don't line up near the doors to run away. Because, first of all, where will they run away to? America doesn't accept so many immigrants. Visitors, yes, but not immigrants. Europe is nothing so attractive today about Europe. As you might know, the immigrants who came in the last wave of last 6 months, more or less, they usually do not want to go to France anymore. They want to go to Germany because they know what happened to France. You know what happened to France? I have a friend, ex-Algerian, who lives in France, who told me that he's looking for a new place. France is not good anymore, like Quebec or something like this. I said, why? So he says those Algerians, where he came from, Algeria, those Algerians do not move from Algeria to France. They move Algeria to France. And this is what he meant, and this is why he, who ran away from Algeria in the beginning of the 80s, because he doesn't want to live in Algeria, now has to run away to find a new place because France reminds him too much of Algeria. Okay? So those immigrants who come, or refugees, or I don't know how to call them, in the last 6 months, they do not want to go to France. They want to go to other countries because they know what happened with France. Okay, so even the Muslims, the Arabs in the Palestinian Authority, they do not run to Europe because they know that life there is not made of gold. And recently, it was published that people from Iraq return to Iraq from Germany. Germany doesn't give them a permanent status. So is Sweden. Stopped the free the open gates, which was there for years already. So when Europe has second thoughts about immigration, people who are in the Middle East have second thoughts whether to immigrate to Europe. So this is what happens. And you know what? To immigrate to the Arab countries, definitely nobody wants when they see the situation there. So both Arabs in Israel and Arabs in Palestinian Authority remain in most cases because this is the best choice. Not that they are, live in heaven, but definitely they do not want to live in hell, as it is in the Middle East in too many places.
Yes, sir.
You said that the Muslims have one Quran. Some people say so do the Jews. They have one Torah, one Talmud, one Moses.
There are many teachings.
But there are still people that observe Shabbat and others that don't. And they pick and choose. They say we eat this and we don't eat that. We'll go to synagogue, but we drive on Shabbat, which clearly is a violation of Jewish law. So why can't we say that Jews also, you have different types of Jews, like different type of Muslims? And
you're right.
A related question is, how do you view the Arabs in Israel? How would you map them? One guy went to ISIS. How bad is
Not
it?
one, many. Okay, about keeping the commandments which you ask, not only within Muslims, you can find it within Jews and I think others as well. Definitely, you're right. This why, by the way, why in Islam there is no secularism, because there was not a secular ideology which takes not keeping the religion as ideology. In Judaism, we developed it, the chiloniyut, or the secularism, which we have in Judaism. So you can be a Jew by your national affiliation, not by your religion. So if you are national Jewish, you don't have to observe the Jewish religion. So this is what we do. In Islam, it was not developed, because you cannot be a Muslim and secular. You can keep more commandments or less, or not at all, but yet you are a Muslim. Many Muslims drink wine and eat swines and do whatever they like and couldn't care less about Islam, but they would never declare themselves as people who left Islam, because if they left Islam, their fate is to be slaughtered, because they are murtad. So they are Muslims, but I would say Muslims light.
Yes, this lady, Nate, you, everybody.
Fail now. A few rounds ago, we were talking about it's the deprived or the uneducated who turn to radicalism. What about San Bernardino? He had a job. She was a pharmacy student.
Many more. This is what I said. It's a pre-assumption which doesn't go along the facts.
Yes, Nate. Nate.
So my question, I know that you stressed in the beginning this notion of radical, moderate is not a real, I mean, it seems as if it's very hard to
define
it. And I guess maybe I'm biased, Jew, observant Jew, so in my mind, very few, very small number of Jews are, in this way violent, radicalized, would do this kind of violence. But is there a way to quantify in any way the percentage or some estimate of that part of Islam it's a huge community.
I think, how do we quantify, you ask, radicals from moderates? I think that we have to look at this as some kind of a pyramid. Think about pyramid. The tip of the pyramid, the most prickly part, let's say they are the jihadists, so those who slaughter people, shoot people as they do there. Beyond them, there is a layer which is very high up in the pyramid, but yet not in the tip, those who help them, factually. Beyond them, there are a wider layer, people who support them with money, with everything. Beyond them, there is another layer of those who sympathize with them. There are beyond them, there is another bigger layer, those who understand them. Okay? Down is a wider, those who are indifferent about them because okay, so this is it's some kind of a continuum which, although small part are really those who will take the knife and slaughter Americans or Jews or whatever, but all the others are beneath them, support, understand, and so forth. This is how a way how to, and I don't really know where to put the line. Those who support, those who sponsor, those who sympathize. I don't know where you put the line.
Yes, sir.
Well,
You and then you afterwards.
I have something that always bothers me about Islam, anti-Semitism, and the rest of the world. And that is that I believe that the rest of the world seems to pin the Islamic problem on Israel, on the Jews. Is there how do we explain that the fear of Islam causes people to side with Islam, to side with a sort of a power against the weak, which is the Jews? You understand my question?
Well, you ask how can we change the world mindset from supporting the poor Muslims to start supporting the poor Jews.
He's asking about what seems to be,
anti-Semitism seems to be
the liberal Islamic alliance.
The premise is anti-Semitism because these poor.
The liberal,
They made them the underdog.
the liberal Islamic alliance, what I call it's not so liberal. It says the communist. It's a red and green alliance. It's something very, very, very strange. Because liberals are liberal, while Muslims are usually not liberals. But I'll tell you, I think that this alliance comes first of all because of they unite the efforts against the system, against the economic system, the political system, wherever they are, in Europe, in America, as they say, F the system, first of all. And they are united with this idea against the system. Now, Jews are usually either part of the system or supported by the system. So here, what the hatred which they had to the system, both sides, the liberals and the Islamists, they direct to the system and then to the Jews, which are part of it. This it might be simplistic, but it has there is a point like this.
Yes, this lady.
How do you see Hitler's role in paving the way for this radical Islamic view?
How do I view the Hitler's role in paving the way?
In North Africa and with the Arabs.
Look, once I was in some museum in Czech Republic, and there was a visitor book, and I looked for an empty page, and I turned some pages, and I saw a page in Arabic. So I read the Arabic, and what they said that Allah should curse Hitler because he started the job and he didn't finish it. Okay? So that's why Allah should curse him, because he didn't finish. Okay? These are visitors who came to see, Europe. So yes, Hitler definitely gave them the example what to do. And as you know, Hitler had a good friend, the Mufti Haj Amir al-Husseini, who recruited some 30,000 Waffen-SS in 1945-4 in order to guard the bridges of the trains which took the Jews from Hungary to Auschwitz. So the partisans will not blow those bridges and will prevent taking the Jews to the gas chambers. So he was there in order to make sure that they arrive the gas chambers, lest they come to Palestine. This was the justification. They don't deny it. The Arabs and Palestinians, they don't deny it, but they justify it by the fact that he wanted those Jews not to come to Palestine. What if they would come to America? Also, do they deserve such an end, such a punishment? Which, okay, so this is definitely Hitler was a role model for many of them. And yes, he didn't finish the job. Let him rest in hell. We'll do the job and go to heaven.
Yes.
I saw a clip a year ago that Morsi, the president of Egypt, spoke in front of 1,000 imams. And he said, be realistic. 1 billion Muslims cannot slaughter 7 billion non-believers. So let's stop teaching the slaughter of the infidels. And I was shocked to hear that. So I guess it fell on deaf ears.
Look, Morsi was calling definitely upon the Muslims in Egypt to get used to a world which they cannot take over. However, I believe that he was not convincing. How do I know this? The Islamic State, which is somehow a granddaughter of the Muslim Brotherhood, what they call ISIS. Let me show you something. The Islamic State issues, yeah, the Islamic State issues coins. You know, coins, because this is a state. It's not an organization anymore. So what they do, in the coins which they produce, they show this. This is the coin of 5 dinar, okay, of the Islamic State. A golden coin. This is 5. And what is this? Okay? They make no doubt.
Used for picking up bed? 5 Used for picking up bed?
Yeah, exactly. And the other side of this coin is this. It says Al-Dawla al-Islamiyya, the Islamic State, 21 karat, 5 dananir, means 5 dinar, 21.25 gram, how much it weighs. And here, Khilafa ala minhaj al-nubuwa, means caliphate, ala minhaj, al-minhag, on the style of the prophecy. Means we, the Islamic State, are following exactly on the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad, the Nubuwa. Okay? And we are, and therefore our goal is this, the whole world. So apparently Morsi did not convince them to leave the other parts of the world alone. Okay? And don't forget, the Muslim Brotherhood, which Morsi was their leader, is the mother of this organization.
But it's outlawed in Egypt.
It sounds nice in Egypt, but you know, they understood what he means.
Yes.
Yes.
I had a question. Whenever we talk about Muslims, we just sort of group them all in one group.
Who are we?
Well, here, right now, we're not talking about...
I talk about the whole array of people.
Well, Sunnis versus Shiites. How does that... How do we differentiate the two? And is there one group that is more tolerant and more...
How do we define between Sunni and Shia if there is some kind of moderate versus radical in the Shi'i Sunni issue? The Sunni Shi'i issue has nothing to do with radicalism versus being moderate, because there are radical Shia and moderate Shia. just like radical Sunnah versus moderate Sunnah. They are fighting each other, not on this question of being radical or being moderate. They are fighting each other about the question who was the legitimate caliph after Muhammad. The Sunnah claimed that is the first, the Abu Bakr, and then Umar, and then Uthman, and then Ali and Muawiyah, while the Shia claimed that only Ali, the fourth caliph, was the legitimate caliph, and his descendants should be the caliphs until the end of time. Okay? While the Sunnah believe that other chain of the Umayyads and the Abbasids, they are the legitimate. And they are fighting each other until this very day on the heritage of Muhammad from 14 centuries ago. Okay? For Americans, it is very hard to understand. I'll give you a good example. You might remember what happened in this country in the elections, presidential elections of 2000, when Al Gore and George W. Bush were the candidates. America was divided half and half, and only Florida was the tipping point, right? And in Florida they had a problem because they are poking papers and some
Hanging chads.
right, and there were some hundreds of papers which were not clear. So and this actually was determined who would be the president. So America went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court looked into this issue. And after a few hours of discussion, the Supreme Court came with a verdict that George W. Bush is the president, and he was the president of America for 4 years and another 4 years, and nobody fights anybody on this question. Just now, imagine that because of this thing, America is divided to two parts. One part supports George W. Bush, and the other part supports Al Gore, and these two parts are fighting each other in all-out war for 14 centuries. This is the Sunni-Shi'i problem. Okay? Different culture? Definitely. Yes, sir.
Well, like a comment. The New York Times several weeks ago had a little box about Sunni and Shia. They wanted to explain it. And in that they asked which is the holiest cities for Sunni and Shia. And guess what wasn't there?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem wasn't there. It was like a miracle that the...
well, this is another difference, because for Sunni Islam is Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem, as they claim. While for the Shia, the third place in holiness is Najaf, a city in southern Iraq, because Jerusalem was sanctified not by Muhammad, but by one of the caliphs of the Umayyad dynasty, because he could not go to pilgrimage in Mecca in the year of 682, 50 years after Muhammad died, and so he sanctified Jerusalem so he and his followers can go to Hajj to Jerusalem instead of Mecca. And this is the whole thing. It's a political issue because of a rebellion which was in Mecca, and they didn't let them come to Mecca for pilgrimage. This is the whole thing. The holiness of Jerusalem is was invented 50 years after Muhammad died. And it's very hard to convince, but Shia definitely do not consider Jerusalem to be holy, because that man who sanctified Jerusalem was killing Shia with no problem. So since Jerusalem was sanctified by their enemies, the Sunnis, the Shia do not consider traditionally Jerusalem is holy. Only since 1979, since the Ayatollahs came to power in Iran, they fell in love in Jerusalem to show that they are no less anti-Zionists than the Sunnah. They couldn't, show themselves as people who do not, who accept Israel. Okay, so this is the only thing. It's all about politics and how to pose yourself.
Yes, Miss.
Professor, just a question in terms of your assessment and looking at the sheer numbers that you pointed out of Muslims who are radical or support radicalism in Islam. In 50 years from now, when you look at the numbers and everything going on, or what has happened the last decade alone, in 50 years, are we still going to be around, or are the radicals really going to be successful and going to win over the world? Because, I mean, it's a very bleak world we live in. What is the remedy? What is the solution for us being a different place 50 years from now and not being under siege of ISIS or whatever the other groups may be at this point?
Well, you very good reason ask where the whole world will be in 50 years, especially the Western civilization, if I hear well in your question. Look, it depends on two things. One is demography, and one is immigration. Demography, unfortunately, within Western societies is negative because, you know, usually men do not bring children to the world. Only if your name is Schwarzenegger. But usually men do not bring children to the world. This is something which nature gave the ability to women. And any society which doesn't, the average of 2.1 at least children per woman is a society in decline. Means it walks proudly into the museum. 3, 4, 5 generations, depends on the pace. So this is a decision of the Western culture, whether to bring children to the world or not. And this is something which, unfortunately, the answer is negative, because what we see in Europe, the birth rate of the French and the others is negative, maybe 1.2, 3 children per woman. This is not the way how to stay out of the museum. This is one element. Second element is, of course, it connected to a number of rate of marriage versus remaining alone, values of family, and so forth. This one on one side. The other side is immigration. What we see that with the decline of societies, there are less people to work in car assembly factories, in transportation, in the supermarkets, in malls, and so forth. So Western societies need immigration to work in factories and so forth. And here we come to the Islamic immigration to Europe and to other parts of the world as well. Some of them immigrate in order to become Americans and Europeans, as I mentioned, but some of them immigrate in order to take over the countries under the idea of hijra jihad. Means they don't have to fight those countries. It's enough if we emigrate and we settle in these countries. After a generation, 2, 3, or 4, we'll take over the country by our number. Okay, so this is another kind of. So when you have on one side decline in demography of the Western societies, and the other side increase in immigration, you definitely are right in your question where we will be in 50 or 100 years from today. Now the question is, what do we do with this? But this is a question which should be answered by legislators who are in charge of legislation about immigration. And I believe that a democracy should know how to defend itself, because otherwise it is a democracy which is in demise.
So,
with this happy note, yes.
So one last
To
question.
follow up on the question, could you try to address it from more of a political perspective? What can the West do? What can democratic societies do to confront the ideology, this reactionary anti-democratic ideology? What can we do to defeat it on the battlefield of ideas?
Look, I'll give you a good example. How Western democracies can defend themselves from ideology which is problematic. I'll give you a good example. Usually it is a basis in democracies that you don't take citizenship of anyone. Even if he is a criminal, if he killed somebody, he spent all his life in jail, yet he is a citizen. And in some countries he even allowed to vote, even if he is in jail. Okay, behavior and citizenship are two separate things. This is one of the cornerstones of Western thinking. Recently, since we have this phenomenon of men, usually, who go to fight in the Islamic State in Israel, there are some dozens of Israeli Muslims, who went to Turkey, like this doctor from Barzilai Hospital. So Israel decided, whenever there is a solid information about somebody who went to the Islamic State, his citizenship is cancelled. Means Israel tells him in its way, well, you chose a different kind of society, we wish you good luck, stay there, and don't bother to come back, because we appreciate your choice, and we highly recommend that you stay in that country. Okay? And you actually are not allowed to come back to Israel because you are not a citizen anymore. We do not need people who got trained in slaughtering people come back to Israel. Okay? So, now, if he comes and proves that he spent the last 3 years in Bondi Beach in Sydney, okay, so his citizenship will be given back to him with a flower. Okay? So this is how Israel defends itself from jihadists. Unfortunately, states like France, who sent all, they didn't say, whose citizens went to the Islamic State in numbers which around 1,800. 1,800 people from France went to the Islamic State. Many of them came back. I believe hundreds, maybe a couple of hundreds. Some of them perpetrated this Friday in October, the massacre in Paris and the Bataclan. Okay, I'm not sure that France should let them in back. Why doesn't France omits their citizenship if there is? I'm not saying arbitrarily. If there is an information that somebody is emigrated to the Islamic State, why does France give him the permission to come back? What? Will he become back a lawyer or an accountant or a professor in university after he took courses in slaughtering people? Okay, so France has to decide whether it is a democracy on suicide track or democracy which knows how to defend its citizens. Means the rules of the game have to be rephrased according to the situation.
So two more questions.
Just very quickly, the French government and other European governments are beginning to criminalize the ideology of radical political Islam. And they're addressing the ideology among jihadis and fighters, and even the spreading of the ideology in prison and in the suburbs of France. It's becoming criminal. Whereas, so if somebody goes to Syria who's a French citizen, it's a crime. In the United States, for example, if an American citizen goes to Syria or Iraq and joins a jihadi group but doesn't commit a criminal act, but they're doing propaganda, they're helping the cause, but they don't commit a criminal act, there's no punishment in this country for that. Only if they commit a criminal act. So, in a sense, tragically, the French and the Europeans are much more advanced than we are here.
You are definitely right, and this is what I'm keep saying. The rules of the game have to be adjusted to the situation. You cannot live with one set of laws when the situation is different. You have to adjust it.
Yes, so one last
Trump
question.
is going to change it. So he says.
True or not, I don't know, but it's a good source. In the Jewish Voice newspaper, there was an article that in the dead of night, UPS airplanes are airlifting quote-unquote refugees from the Middle East to this country.
I have no idea.
Supervised by our president.
I have no idea about airplanes who bring refugees to this country. I'm in Dhaka.
Where did you read?
Look,
To answer Charles.
Can I say something?
look, the refugee issue is very sensitive. It's very sensitive because these are poor people, especially children, women who did no evil to anyone. Why should they suffer? Why shouldn't they be supported? Why shouldn't they be rescued? And this is a very important question, especially within Jews, because we remember how nations did not help us when we, if you remember the ship St. Louis, which looked for a harbor. Okay, so definitely we Jews cannot stand aside and see how people are drowning in the Mediterranean when they are looking for a better place to live. However, having said that, there are two comments. One is about what can be done for these refugees. There are three countries which are the most, I would say, responsible for the atrocities in Syria. One is Turkey, which allowed all the jihadists to come to the Islamic State. The other is Iran, which supports the regime. And the other is Saudi Arabia, which supports the rebels. How many refugees these countries take? Of course, Turkey did, but she sends them to Europe. But how many refugees did Iran take? How many refugees did Saudi Arabia take? Okay, 0. Why? The Kuwaiti Minister of Foreign Affairs was asked recently, why doesn't Kuwait take some refugees to Kuwait? So he said that these refugees from Syria have different culture from Kuwait. So Kuwait cannot accept them. Okay? They are the same culture as Germany, as everybody knows, or France. Okay? So this is Hawaii Arabs. Now I'm asking here, why was somebody in this country think about the idea to make a condition that the deal about the nuclear program in Iran will be conditioned by the fact that Iran accepts 300,000 refugees? Why not? You can make a condition. If they want the money, the trillions which they get now, why shouldn't they take some refugees as well to feed them? After all, they are much more responsible for the refugee problem in Syria than the United States of America. Okay, this is one issue, one comment about the refugee issue. Second is what people know already, that within these refugees there are a small percentage of jihadists, because the Islamic State succeeded to implant its jihadists, some of them in the... Okay, so one says, well, there's only 1% of jihadists. And okay, so I ask, if somebody gives you a bag with 200 M&Ms, only one is poisoned, how many will you eat?
And how many of those, quote, refugees were responsible for throwing the Jews out of their countries?
How many of those refugees are responsible for throwing Christians from the ships which were tied to go to Europe? And these were things which happened in recent months, when groups come from Libya, for example, to go to Italy through the Mediterranean Sea, and Muslims are throwing Christians to the sharks. Okay? And this is another question which could be asked.
All right, so we'll stop there. And on behalf of ISGAP and this wonderful audience, Dr. Kedar would like to thank you for very stimulating.
Thank you very much.
So, do you want to give you some water to refresh?
I will.
Thank you for coming.